Welcome back to AsArt with Nick and John and our special guest Taylor.
Hi.
Yay!
Today we're going to talk about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Is it a flop? Was it good? Is it going to win an Oscar? We're going to find out. So, John, how many times have you seen this movie?
So I've seen it once. I saw it on Blu-ray when it came out probably a month and a half ago. So I didn't see it in theaters. I was really eager to see it. Never really quite got around to it because we were in the process of moving. But that made me even more excited to see it. And I was talking to Taylor a little bit before we started rolling. Like I like to see Quentin Tarantino movies at least twice before I give too much feedback on it. Because the first time I saw Pulp Fiction, I saw it in theaters and I just came out of the theater. I'm like, what was that? And I just saw. And then when it came out, on VHS or whatever, a few years later, I was like, oh, that movie is amazing. But the first time I didn't get it. So, Taylor, you've seen it more than I have, right?
Yeah, this was my third time seeing
What?
it. I saw it in the theater and then rented it on, just a big screen home
And
experience.
were you eager to, did you get all the hype going into seeing it in theaters or did you know much about it or?
I actually didn't know anything about it. It was one of those,
Oh, okay, perfect.
I think, we were trying to think of when it came out. I want to say, was it mid or early summer?
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
I think
and
around
so
then.
it was just, it was a busy time for me too, so I didn't catch it. But that's kind of like a great way to view movies, I think, when you don't see the
Yes.
trailer.
Yes.
Because I don't
Yeah.
really go to the movies that often, so I don't catch trailers. But I love that because you really come in without any, expectations. Yeah. So
Or spoilers.
yeah,
Which
spoilers.
nowadays with the internet, I feel like there's spoilers everywhere. Like if you want to
It's
see
really
a movie,
hard,
don't
yeah.
go on the internet.
Yeah, and I feel like this movie did have a major spoiler because
Oh,
after I
yeah.
saw it, I told Nick, I'm like, "Do you want to know the spoiler?" He's like, "No," but then it's like, "Wait,
Oh,
a Quentin Tarantino movie has a spoiler?"
But that's different. Like who
Tell
cares
me.
about Star Wars?
Yeah. Yeah, who?
Misa,
So,
Nosa.
so what was your initial
Double checking
impression
on
with
my
it, Taylor? Like, did you like it as much as you thought you would? Or, well, you didn't have any expectations. So did you like it as much as other Quentin Tarantino movies? Or?
Yeah, like when I was in college, 18, 19, 20, I loved Quentin Tarantino. I felt like it was
Uh-huh.
kind of a personality trait. If you're into movies, you'd be like a Quentin Tarantino person and like talking to people
Yeah.
about it. Um, but yeah, I think it's like up there in probably my top three, honestly, because I
cool.
come from a writing background, and I just think that I mean, Reservoir Dogs writing is amazing, but
Yeah. Yeah.
I just feel like it's a good for the moment. I think it works right now, but I think it's also kind of going to be a classic.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just love the dialogue. I mean, he kind of always tells stories and the kind of weaving the different
Yes. Yes.
flashbacks and stuff. I just think it worked really well, and I loved it. And I feel like a lot of people I talked to, they didn't not like it, but it's not in the top for them. So
It's tough because it's not as visual, right?
It's in your kind of top Tarantino films. I'll give my thoughts on it in a little bit. Like Nick, so you've seen it.
Once.
it hasn't
Once,
even
yeah,
been
you just
24
saw it
hours.
last
I mean,
Yeah.
15 minutes ago. I just finished watching it.
So I'm interested because we haven't talked about if you liked it or not after,
Oh.
because you told me you were going to watch it last time. Like, oh, I'll be curious to see what you think. So what was your initial impressions? And
I liked
you
it.
kind of had a little bit of an idea what it was about going in, right?
Yes. And I liked it, but it's not like one of my favorites, Quentin. But I'm also a very visual person. And I feel like this is a very script heavy acting, which is beautiful. Not too crazy with the camera angles. I think my favorite shot in the whole film is when they have the tracking shot when he's acting and he like messes up and he's like lying and he gets pissed off and they
Yes,
move it
I
back.
love that part.
And I feel like that scene alone is going to win it the Oscars for Hollywood because all the big guys will be like,
Yeah.
oh, I've been on the other side of the camera. Let's
I've
give this guy
forgotten
the
my
Oscar."
line. Once upon a time in Hollywood.
But
It's really, I mean, it's really, really clever. Yeah. So you like certain shot elements. So maybe not in your favorites in Quentin Tarantino, you were saying, or?
Well, then again, I just watched it, but I liked the reason why I like this film. Like, this would not be a good movie for someone's first time watching a Quentin Tarantino film.
Yeah.
Because it's so different from his other ones, right? Because like you watch this, you're like, oh, is this like a comedy? You know what I mean? Because it's so much funnier than his other films, not as violent. And I feel like if they jump to Pulp Fiction right after this, they're just gonna, whoa, like what the heck? That's not even similar to, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. But I thought it was his funniest film by far. I think this was like his Jay and Silent Bob, because I remember
Really?
he talked to what
Kevin
was
Smith?
Kevin Smith, and he was jealous of Clerks. He's like, I wish I could make a movie where it's just dialogue heavy, and with like little scenes and stuff. And I feel like this is like his way of doing the Clerks.
Yeah,
Interesting.
like
Interesting.
that,
Yeah, I didn't think about that either. That's interesting that Kevin Smith kind of picked up on that too, like kind of wanting to do that type of film. Yeah, so maybe it's because I haven't seen like multiple times all those Kevin Smith films. I've seen them, but not multiple times. So my going in, I was a little bit biased because whenever I have anticipation for a movie, it's hard for me to set that aside. Whereas if I don't hear about a movie and I see it and I love it, then, you know, it catches me by surprise.
Yeah.
So this movie, everybody had been, even though I didn't see it in theaters, I had heard this is his best movie since Pulp Fiction. And I kind of went in with that expectation of it to be that.
Yeah.
And I thought it was kind of Nick was saying it was so different. I thought it was kind of a natural kind of progression for his films. I think of Inglourious Bastards, which is probably my second favorite film of his, or maybe Django. Those were getting a little bit more comedic. These always had that dark comedy, but they seem like it's kind of a natural progression. But yeah, it's definitely the most humorous one. I liked it a lot, but I've liked his last couple films a lot too. Like I liked Hateful Eight and I liked Inglourious Bastards a lot. And again, I had no idea about those movies. Like my friend, former student as well, he's like, hey, you want to go see Hateful Eight? I'm like, what's that? He's like, that's the new Quentin Tarantino movie.
Yeah,
like,
I feel like that one didn't get as much hype. I don't know
No,
why
it didn't.
That was.
It didn't seem like it wasn't as high of a production either. It kind of mostly
Right.
took place in that cabin and things like that. But
Yeah.
I really like that, but I didn't know anything about it. And the same thing with Django. I didn't see that in theaters. I didn't really know much about it, and I was just laughing hysterically because I had no idea like the whole dentist thing. And so this one didn't hit me quite as much, just because I was expecting a lot more. But I still really liked it. It's just my expectations kind of skewed things a little bit.
Yeah, and I just kind of had this thought now, looking at it from the lens of a Quentin Tarantino film. I mean, like, I know that it's a Quentin Tarantino film, but I feel like sometimes actors say that they do, you know, the blockbuster films, you know, to pay their mortgage and that stuff, but then they do like the movie for themselves where maybe they do it for free or like barely nothing. But I feel like this is like Quentin Tarantino, like this is the one for himself, you know, like that's, I felt like you can really see his heart in it. You know, he loves Hollywood, obviously. His like movie store, like didn't he like work in a movie store? And it's just, I feel like his heart's in it a lot too. So that's why I really liked it.
And Taylor, you were saying how you feel like you think it'll probably do well in Oscars and things like that. And you want to give the reason you're telling me about why?
Yeah, so I think it's kind of a common thing that Hollywood really likes to see movies about Hollywood. That's not really like a novel concept. I think people talk about that but like in 2012 when The Artist came out, and people, I feel like that wasn't super popular, and it won Best Picture, and it was black and white, and everyone's like, what the heck, why did this win? And everyone's like, well, you know, Hollywood loves it to, you know, talk about themselves, and I'm sure there's...
And anybody, if you're watching this and you haven't seen it, so The Artist is about the silent age of movie cinema, and so it is shot in black and white. It's very artistically... At the end, you get this payoff, you get an idea on what Hollywood was going through at the time. So kind of the same thing you're saying here. It kind of gives you... Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt them, just if they haven't seen it.
Definitely,
and then the other one you were saying that kind of talked about Hollywood was... I forgot which one was the other one.
La La Land, which I guess isn't a good example because that was the one where like it won Best Picture for like 5 seconds and then they realized that they did the wrong one. But so that kind of turns that concept on its head. So maybe we go into this, who knows? You know, we have some examples of that happening, of a movie about Hollywood being rewarded in such a way, but who knows? I think
but getting nominations for Academy Award is already big anyway. So as long as
and there's already so many big names actors in this too, where it almost gives it the backing to be. But you know, the comedy wouldn't have worked if Leonardo DiCaprio didn't play it so serious.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, because there were so many times, like, the lines he was saying.
Just
like,
his absurdity, like, made it funny.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't have worked. I don't feel like if it was another... I mean, he was cast so perfectly.
Yeah. I think it's hard to imagine. So, yeah, it's like maybe it's not as strong of a film, because if you think of really anybody else as Leonardo DiCaprio's role, I don't know if it would have worked. So, I don't know.
I thought... Everybody's roles were really, really fun. I thought it's funny. I had a hard time imagining Brad Pitt and Leonardo DiCaprio in a movie because they're both kind of leading artist roles that you don't think of. Well, I mean, Brad Pitt's done other, well, and so is Leonardo DiCaprio. So they've both done Quentin Tarantino ensemble type cast. So I guess it's not. I had a hard time picturing those two kind of like iconic actors sharing, you know, kind of co-starring roles. But it was really fun. It was kind of funny that at least in the terms of the story, that Brad Pitt, who you think of as, you know, the longer term, even though they've both been acting forever, he's the kind of the stunt man for Leonardo DiCaprio, which I thought was kind of funny. But like you were saying, like Hollywood about Hollywood, one of my favorite moments that Nick was saying too is that tracking shot, because while they were going through that one long tracking shot, I forgot we were watching like a parody of a Hollywood film. I thought I was just watching that film for a second. And then when they mess up, I'm like, oh, wait, right, this is a film about Hollywood. And I thought it was really fun because it kind of pulls you out of it, jars you, but then you're like, you do appreciate how the actors draw you in and the chem works draws you in. And so it's kind of a really fun, I kind of appreciate it, you know. So even if it gets a nod just for being about Hollywood, I thought that was kind of a neat thing as well.
Yeah, it's not going to be like, oh, dang it, it should have been this other movie. It's like, yeah, if it wins, I think it's warranted.
It's a really just like you guys are saying. I mean, and obviously we all expect it, but it always delivers. The dialogue is just hilarious and insane, but it has that Quentin Tarantino dialogue for sure.
And it totally was a Quentin Tarantino movie. I mean, they even did the Apple cigarettes.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't think about that.
Do you know about the Apple cigarettes?
During the
No.
credits?
Every movie has Apple cigarettes. It's like his brand of cigarettes in all of his films.
I did not know that. There you go.
Yeah.
And then also, John, did you feel like this film lacked anything at all? Or overall, would you say it was a...
So, like I said, I do want to watch it a second time. Like, I feel Taylor's probably in the best position to give us ideas on, just because she's seen it 3 times. You've seen it once. I've seen it once. It was not quite what I was like. I completely forgot they even had the whole Manson, you know, ranch and follow. Like, I forgot that was even supposed to be a factor in the movie. So I was watching and they got to this ranch. And I'm like, boy, I really feel like they're building up this ranch. What's the big deal? I'm like, oh, that's right. That's like, I completely forgot because I didn't even notice in the very opening party scene that, you know, Charles Manson's supposed to be there. I forgot, like, oh, that's right, he's supposed to be at this party and things like that. So I had completely detached. I'm like, what's the story about again? Just a guy and his stunt man? I'm like, okay, that just by itself is fun enough. But then when they kind of twisted and weaved all that in there, I thought that was really fun. And I did think it was like going back to a natural progression, because you get Inglourious Basterds, like Nick. Well, you go in and tell what you were saying. You felt like it was lacking, because I'm curious.
I just thought it lacked tension for a Quentin Tarantino film.
Yeah, I could see what you mean, because it's like always, I feel like on the precipice of violence or like some very, you know, just an altercation of some sort, or like deadly usually. So you're kind of always like.
Yeah, I was just like, there was such a big buildup. I wanted maybe something more, but Taylor has a great maybe explanation why there wasn't anything more. Like the whole... Remember, you just told it to us before we started.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
You're like, oh, don't put me on the
Well,
spot.
it was for that example, because you were saying there wasn't a lot of tension in the Spawn Ranch scene.
Yeah.
Because I was watching it with Nick and Allie, and I could tell that, you know, what's going to be... What was that guy's name?
Tex?
No, the guy who's in the... George, I think.
Yeah, George.
So
Yeah, George, yeah.
when we hear about this George character and it really seems fishy, and we think that he's going to be like they killed him or something, or maybe like what did they do with him? What is he in this room? And then he's just sleeping in the room. And I think the tension of it really just shows how absurd the Manson family is, and it kind of plays that part. Like, I was trying to justify why that scene was so long, why there was so much buildup, and I'm like, well, it shows you that they're just kind of crazy, you know, like they're gonna do what they need to do to
obey orders or whatever they do for their cause or their... Then I also thought, I don't know if you guys thought this, I thought it was a little lazy. I don't know if it was lazy of Quentin.
Ooh, he's kind of Quentin Tarantino lazy.
I don't know if that's the right word.
That's our headline right there.
There was so much voiceover to cover story when he was in Italy and when he came back. I just thought, like, okay, like, you're just going with the voiceover with some shots and them, like, drinking, and then all of a sudden it's like you have to jump 6 months to this action scene. I was just like...
I guess what I agree. I think maybe they were looking at their watches when they were editing, and they're like, okay, we're getting into hour 3 here. But I don't know if Quentin Tarantino is concerned with that.
That's exactly what I read. I read that he wants to have like a 4-hour cut of it or whatever released in a year or two. It's like, Nick, so maybe they have all this stuff, and exactly what Taylor was saying is like, all right, editing wise, I'm sure we would all check in to watch that super long edition. If we can do the extended edition of Lord of the Rings, we can probably do anything. but most people probably, especially if you're sitting in a theater for a long time, you start getting a little antsy and things like that, especially with mostly dialogue. At least Lord of the Rings, there's big action sequences. But yeah, so supposedly he wants to have a really long cut of it. And I imagine a lot of those voiceovers would kind of cut out that what maybe could be considered non-essential, but I think Taylor's exactly right in that. Yeah. Now, do they have the screenplay out for that? Like, are you able to get the screenplay and read it?
At this point, I think you would. I don't know for sure, but
Especially
I think so. Yeah, if it's
Because that'd be interesting to
nominated.
see if they have all that in the screenplay, and then when they're actually filming and storyboarding, they cut it out or not. That'd be kind of interesting to see.
Yeah, and I think something else is that we're working with a timetable where they needed it to be in August of they needed it to be on a certain date. So we jumped from what was it, like February to August. I mean, that might, explain something, that this is kind of held to a date in a way that like Inglourious Bastards wasn't. I mean, that's held to a time period, but we needed an actual August 18th or something. So perhaps.
Are you a fan of Bruce Lee, John?
What's that?
Are you a fan of Bruce Lee?
I know a little bit about him. I don't know a whole lot of his background. I remember I was listening to a couple different podcasts and some interviews, and they didn't like how they portrayed him. But I was like,
his family was really mad.
Yeah, I was
were they?
Yeah.
Like when I saw him get thrown against the car, I'm like, this is the guy who knocks out people with a punch. Like, this is so weird.
Yeah, like some stuntman can do that.
Well, so in real life, that was based largely, or at least in large part, a guy named Gene LaBelle. So his nickname is Gene LaBelle, and he was just a monster of the time. And Grant, I mean, you have to remember, Bruce Lee's little dude. I'm tiny as well, like Nick and I, like Hobbit size, but he's a little dude. Gene LaBelle, who was a stuntman in movies and knew Bruce Lee, and was really good friends with him. So they never had a fight like that. But so in real life, that really happened. Gene LaBelle probably would have destroyed him. Like, I mean, it's probably just a real life thing. But at the same time, it's like, I could see why his family would get upset about that. But I just you can't take anything Quentin Tarantino does in a movie seriously. I mean, he altered Hitler's life. He altered the man.
And it's so funny because like when I was watching this movie and it was getting towards the end, I knew they were going to go to the wrong house. And I don't know if it's because of like his way of storytelling and like twisting history. I'm like, oh, he's going to go into the house and everything's going to be okay.
Did you anticipate that, Taylor? Or?
I'm trying to remember back. I think I did anticipate it when they had the interaction with Leonardo DiCaprio, when he had the margarita in his blender,
which was hilarious.
Yeah, because I was trying to think like storytelling wise, like how is this gonna work? Is he gonna like stop them from going in? And then the Polanskis have a gate, so like how would he? I don't know. I think at some point going into the movie, I didn't think so, but at kind of.
Well, I guess earlier in the movie, didn't Manson get through the gate?
But they must have buzzed him in because they buzz people. Well, I mean, you can climb over a gate.
Anyways,
this is
it's just a gate.
But certainly didn't think that the pit bull would.
Oh my god, that was so intense.
It was so fun. You know what? If they didn't have Inglourious Bastards and they didn't have it to where they altered, the death of Hitler, I was curious how they were going to handle it. If they did have them go into the mansion, that's a much more sensitive subject. It's kind of weird because if you think about World War II, you have free reign. You can make fun of or rip on Nazis however you want. And in Germany, you're not even allowed to show a swastika. It's like outlawed and banned. Yeah. But overall in the world, it's a lot more, you have a lot more creative freedom in how you depict Nazis and things like that. Whereas like these Manson murders, especially being in Hollywood and things like that, I was curious how he's going to, it's Quentin Tarantino, so he doesn't really throw any flying Fs. He doesn't really care, but at the same time, I was like, oh, how is he going to handle this to where it's not considered distasteful? And then so when he did change the ending where they went into the wrong house. I'm like, oh, okay, this kind of makes sense in the purpose of his storytelling. It's not too far from what he did in a previous movie. But I was really curious. I'm like, gosh, how's he going to handle this? Do they just have them driving up to the house and they just cut the movie? That seems like a serious note for Quentin. So I was really fascinated. I didn't know that they were going to go in the wrong house, but once they did, I was like, oh, this is going to be fun. Because I always remember that shot of Hitler at the end of Inglourious Bastards, his head just exploding. I'm like, oh my gosh. So
yeah, and it's really gratifying in a way because if you even read the Wikipedia page on the actual murder that took place, there's a pregnant beautiful, famous actress, you kind of feel like, yeah, you're
You
really
seem to
excited
feel like
about
at
it.
least you want to see them get it in the movie. Yeah.
Yeah, and I saw this for a third time, as I've said, and each time I see that part where it's the camera shot where they go above the house and it shows Leonardo DiCaprio coming around the corner and hugging a pregnant Sharon Tate, I had the same kind of like light feeling of just like, oh, if
Oh,
only that would
man.
have happened.
Gosh.
Yeah, so.
So now, if you didn't know about the Manson family a little bit and Tate and all that background, would this and the ranch and everything, would this movie have the same impact for you?
I don't think so. I think that it really
Yeah.
relies heavily on you knowing the history of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What did you know about that, Nick? All that stuff or no?
Well, yeah, I know about it. Not like to the degree Allie and Taylor know, but
Because the only reason I knew about the Manson murders and Tate and everything like that is because I listened to this podcast called You Must Remember This, and it's about the golden age of Hollywood. And I forgot, it's like Charles Manson's Hollywood. It's like this 5-hour long thing or 3 or 4 hour long thing where she goes into how he was in the Hollywood circles, meeting all these people. And she gives the background for Tate and all the people and everybody's background, all the major players. But if I didn't know that, I had no idea what the ranch was. I had no idea about, the house and the murders, and it wouldn't have had the same impact. So for me, and that was just maybe a couple of years ago that I really kind of heard that podcast. So for me, I wouldn't have known or had the same impact.
and he was looking for Brian Wilson from the Beach Boys, right?
He was looking for Terry from the Beach Boys.
Oh, Terry from the Beach
Yeah,
Boys.
so they, in the beginning when, I think it's the only time Manson, Nick, when we were watching the
that's
movie,
right.
he kept calling him Marilyn Manson, so I'm just trying not
I
to
do that
say
too. I do it
I'm
too.
like, wait, what's his name?
Hey, there's
Sorry,
Marilyn.
So the one time they cross paths, you hear him talking about like, oh, is it Terry here? Because if people don't really know the background of the Sharon Tate murders, and I mean, other people were murdered at the house too. It's not just her.
Yeah,
But he was targeting their house because the lead singer of Beach Boys had previously lived there, and they had rejected Manson's
albums, right?
album his some of his tracks that he sent over. So it was really just like a blind, vengeance of like, go to that house and kill them. So it's like it wasn't even supposed to be who was in there.
It's crazy.
So
But it was interesting. I mean, he made it happen in a way where, like you said, you almost feel even though you know the truth of it, you almost feel elated in the end. But
Yeah.
again, if
And
you,
it's
if you
kinda
had
like
it,
that-
if you didn't know the background,
yeah, like when he annihilates Hitler's face in Inglourious
Yeah.
Bastards, like that kind of, which is interesting because I almost didn't think they would go into the wrong house at some point, because he's like done that before, and that's not really like Tarantino, I think, to like recreate history like that. But I guess it wasn't in the same way.
I guess you never know with him, right?
Right. Yeah. So.
It can go either way.
so it was fun. I like I said, I think probably it's funny. A lot of movies you see the first time and you don't like them as much in subsequent viewings. But I think probably for me, this will be another movie where I watched Django. Like I didn't see that in theaters either, but once it came out, I watched it probably 3-4 times in a week. I was just laughing so hard. And I think this will be maybe not as maybe not to the same level for me, but I think I'm definitely going to enjoy it even more the second time now that I have a general idea on what's going on. And now I don't have those huge, crazy expectations kind of going anymore. So Nick, and it always surprises me the type of movies that you like, because I always feel you as happy-go-lucky. Oh, animation, Clyde at the Chance of Meatballs, blah, blah, blah. So I don't know. I have a hard time like picturing you sitting down and watching that, because Nick and I always would talk about like Harry Potter and things like that. So
it's just
It's
fun.
like it's not high fantasy, and there's practical effects.
Yeah.
What is Nick gonna think?
I finally get to enjoy something.
Yeah, that's true.
No wands, no lightsabers, no swords. Well, maybe swords.
Oh yeah,
Flamethrowers.
flamethrower.
Oh yeah, that was
John.
man. It definitely at the end it picked up a lot. What were you saying?
I know me and you watched The Irishman, and that's probably going to be nominated for Best Film too. So 2 iconic actors, 2 iconic directors, themes, even themes like the whole like Godfather kind of vibes to like West Hollywood, or not West Hollywood, but
Old Hollywood
old Hollywood,
mid-century Hollywood.
mid-century Hollywood. If you had to pick one right now between the 2, which one would you pick?
Man, I mean, those are really different films, and it kind of depends on what, if we go with Taylor's theory, which I kind of like, is like, what's Hollywood going to like more? Are they going to like classic Hollywood cinema in a Martin Scorsese film, or do they like Hollywood talking about Hollywood, as far as behind the scenes on how it's shot?
Yeah.
It's 2 Hollywood movies, basically.
Yeah, I mean they really are, and I kind of like the idea. It would be kind of fun if The Irishman did win, just because this is the first time where it'd be a streaming movie exclusively, kind of having that happen, and that would kind of push the boundaries of, okay, do you still have to have this limited theater release of The Irishman and Claus or whatever had in order to still be nominated for stuff, because the streaming stuff is kind of catching up anyway.
Yeah, so it's interesting that you bring up that it would be the first streaming movie to win. We're talking about Best Picture or Screenplay, or just really?
I think just Academy Awards in
Just
general.
something for Academy Awards.
Yeah,
right?
I think some streaming stuff has won, but
Oh, okay,
yeah,
okay.
and it's interesting because I think that would make a dichotomy of the Irishman being streaming, being a classic kind of like Hollywood storyline, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And then Once Upon a Time in Hollywood being shot on film. You know, Quentin Tarantino probably didn't like that we watched it on a projector. So it's kind of like two very different Hollywood.
Yeah.
I didn't think of that.
It'll be fun. It'll be really, really fun. I mean, I think both of them, and it obviously depends on what type of movies people like, but both of those movies are very dialogue driven. I mean, we were saying we didn't get as much action as we're used to in a Quentin Tarantino movie. If you think about a Martin Scorsese film, yeah, still a lot of violence and like kind of violent undertones, but a lot of dialogue. But Nick and I just loved both of them. So I like The Irishman maybe even more just because you're not seeing those type of films very often. Not that you get Quentin Tarantino that often either. You know, he definitely has his own brand of humor. But
it's really interesting too because they're both based off of history. You have like a Jimmy Hoffa behind the JFK assassination, all that stuff, and now you have like the Hollywood with the whole Tate and all that stuff. So,
has Quentin Tarantino ever been nominated for Best Picture or Screenplay or anything like that?
Yeah.
I should know this, but
I think
has he ever won or no?
Django.
Was Jackie Brown?
Oh yeah, I think Jackie Brown was.
So I was gonna say if he hasn't won an Academy Award, that might give them more reason to have that win. Whereas Martin Scorsese didn't win for the longest time, and then he won for The Departed, so he has an Academy Award.
Yeah.
If Quentin Tarantino doesn't, which we should know
So-
this, but if he doesn't, then that might be a little bit more reason for that to go through.
So
It's kinda like the
basically, you're
Leonardo
saying it's
DiCaprio not
rigged.
winning thing.
It's
Yeah,
rigged. It's just rigged than the Academy Awards.
No, I really think they are, because I think that we were talking about this at lunch. I think the Academy Awards very much thinks like, okay, well, maybe this isn't Leo's best movie, but we got it wrong and he needs to have one, so let's just give it to him. Like, I totally think that's how they operate.
It's true.
Like,
Well, so a little bit of side story, and this is kind of going off like the beaten path, but this is very valid. So a school I used to work at, a guy for visual effects is on the Academy Award nomination board, and he always gets his school. Oftentimes he'll get them nominated for student Academy Awards. Like he'll get them in the nomination pool because he has so much sway and pull, and it's very political. So Hollywood is very political in and of itself. So I think if you think back on some of the movies that have won Best Picture, like The Artist I watched and I liked, but I didn't think it was Best Picture. Again, obviously I don't have a huge attachment to the silent era film, but like back when they're trying to make a political statement, the movie Philadelphia, I don't think anybody ever talks about that film, but when, being homosexuality and things like that and acceptance thing, when that was a big political topic, I feel like they pushed that film. And obviously it had have you guys seen that movie or no?
no, but yeah, I'm familiar with it.
Okay, I mean, it had Tom Hanks and it had Denzel Washington, so it obviously had the talent in there and things like that. But I feel like that was kind of pushed forward because of the political annotations and the kind of the statement they were trying to make. So yeah, I feel like they definitely can get what they want kind of in there. And I think that's how Hollywood kind of is run to an extent as far as your political kind of choices.
Yeah, and I think it's gonna maybe impact if they'll win or not, talking about The Irishman or Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, who else is nominated? Because I think now the Oscars, even just in the last 3 years, is very cognizant of having representation, which I think is a good thing, but that kind of mixes it up too, because in the past you're like, it'll for sure win, but now you kind of have to think about like, okay, who else is going to be in there? What is that going to say if they win? I think people are more concerned with that now too.
And
there was that movie
I don't
about
even know all the films. Like I haven't seen a whole lot. Like kind of like you were saying, I haven't seen a lot of films this year. So whatever's nominated, there's a good chance I haven't seen it.
What was that movie like? Won't You Be My Neighbor? Is that going to be nominated?
Oh. That's not out yet, right? With Tom Hanks.
No. It came out. I think it's going to be nominated.
Yeah, is it? I don't know if that's like really an Oscar, like a Best Picture nomination, but I can definitely see Tom Hanks being nominated for it.
And I don't think he's even the main actor, so he would get it for supporting.
Oh, really? Oh, right.
Because it's about the journalist.
Right. Yeah.
That'd be fun I've been wanting to see that. Like when we saw the trailer for that, Kate and I, my wife, were like, "Oh, this would be really fun to see." It's just, and I don't even have his background as much as a lot of people. But like, oh, that's just an interesting take on things. Yeah, so that'd be kind of a fun movie to do as well. So yeah, if that's already out, I would imagine that'd be in the mix somewhere. But you're right, that might be more of an independent film. I don't know. I mean, it has Tom Hanks, so it has a big actor. But you're like you were saying, he's kind of in that stage where he can just choose the movies he wants to do for him. He doesn't need to do his.
You know what, John? I have a little quick question. Do you think Claws would be nominated for Best Animated Film?
I think it will, because it had the technology in there, and also because they went to the trouble to have it streaming in theaters for that little bit, for that short period of time. I don't know if it'll win because I haven't seen really any other animated films this year that I
think Frozen 2 is probably going to be nominated.
Yeah, I feel like Disney ones really have pull in that category.
But I think it'll be in the mix just because, I mean, if you think about it from a Hollywood perspective too, 2D animation that has a kind of sweet spot for a lot of people, but you don't get many of them. That's the kind of a return of that. So that might even be a kind of an industry statement as well, them wanting that in there. Whether it wins or not is completely different. But if it's even nominated, that'd be a huge thing for streaming.
What if Avengers beat out Martin Scorsese?
For best visual effects or for what?
Well, just because there was that clash.
Oh, that's right.
What do you say? It wasn't like a real movie or something?
Yeah.
It's not real cinema, which I mean, if you look at the type of movies he makes, you can understand why he said that. But yeah,
But wouldn't that be hilarious if they like sweep it?
I'm sure there will be a joke made by whoever hosts the Oscars.
Well, it's interesting because didn't Return the King like sweep the Oscars?
Yeah, it got it was tied for the most Academy Awards ever. I think
like 11 or something like that.
I think Lawrence of Arabia's had that many, and then I think Titanic had that many, but not many movies have had that many. Yeah.
Did they also win Best Actor? Did Frodo get, or Elijah Wood?
Did Sam?
I mean, I don't know. I don't remember. I just remember it won so many that I forgot who was hosting. They're like, well, there's officially no one left in New Zealand to thank, So it's like it might have been, it just won so many that people kind of almost checked out. It was like, Super Bowl where it's like 80-0,
Yeah.
Well, it's because, Avengers took over the world for those months.
Yeah. So I feel like it needs to be recognized somewhere.
Or 20 years or whatever.
Yeah, and I think Return of the King won so many because it didn't. The first two, Fellowship and The Two Towers, didn't win that much. They were nominated, they didn't win that much, so it almost felt kind of like what you guys are saying, where they're due this. And if Avengers hasn't really won that much either, then they might feel let's do that as well because obviously a huge achievement. It's been building towards. They should give a lifetime achievement just to the Avengers, just to the Marvel movies.
They all just go up there.
We have a special Tony Stark award that goes. Here's the Iron Man award. It's like a golden Iron
It looks
Man.
like it.
But that's a really good kind of question for best visual effects because the Irishman really put, like we talked about it in one of the episodes, is like the Irishman really pushed for the de-aging in ways that it's never been done before. But then you look at the Avengers and every shot is just absolutely crazy in an in-your-face way, whereas the Irishman it's in a much more subtle way. And where do you value that? I remember one of my instructors when I first started grad school, he had worked on episode 1, The Phantom Menace, which you never had a main lead digital character at the time, and that was Jar Jar. Now everybody hated him, but that was the same year that The Matrix won Best Visual Effects. And he was really upset, and other people in Industrial Light and Magic were really upset because we had created the very first time we had a lead actor as a digital character, and yet The Matrix won it. But The Matrix did it in a more ingenuitive kind of built into the story type way. So what do you value more? Do you value it forwarding the story? Do you value it being like a spectacle? So that's going to be really interesting as well.
It's also going to be interesting too because Star Wars came out this year.
Yeah, that's right. And that's kind of the end of that whole thing as well. And that did have beautiful visual effects, whether you love the story or not.
I mean, I don't think it was as beautiful as Empire still. When it comes to lighting and color, like beautiful. When you say beautiful, but it was kind of like Avengers. It was just busy. It's like get all of our Lego pieces and throw them in the sky, and those are all spaceships. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
In the past, speaking as a not visual effects person, when you see who wins, are you usually surprised, or like, do you think, oh yeah, that makes sense? Because I just think of like the whole Academy voting on something, like I wouldn't really know good. I mean, I would know bad visual effects, I guess, if I saw it, but it's just like interesting because it's kind of like people who don't really know it voting on it. I don't know, but maybe they're swayed other ways. I don't know.
The people that are voting on aren't necessarily visual effects people either, right? It's just
Yeah.
people in Hollywood that's sent out to. What do you think, Nick?
I don't think people care.
Yeah,
I honestly-
it's early in the night.
I really don't think majority of people care. That's why I think when Life of Pi won, and all those artists lost jobs and they were picketing and they cut off their audio, there was no change because no one cares about the visual effects. You know what I mean? I don't think it matters. They can pick. They're all beautiful visual effects. Tons of artists worked on all these films. And, you know, if you pick any of the three we mentioned, I would be like, okay, cool, because there's a lot. Every shot has a green screen. Every shot has a 3D model on it. Like it's all visual
crazy
effects.
animation, whether it's 2D or 3D. Like I remember when I think Blade Runner in 2049 won for best visual effects. I forgot what else was nominated that year, but there was some solid movies that were really nominated. I'm like, all right, cool, that was kind of fun. That wouldn't it be funny if I was completely wrong? I didn't even win, but I'm pretty sure it won.
I mean, I'm there with you, sure.
Yeah. You
That
didn't
would've
do
been
it
weird.
one, John. It did not win, but so I like it when things that are kind of creative or pushing the story. Like I like the idea that The Matrix won way back in 1998 or 99 over Episode 1, just because it was a completely different way of doing the effects, and that's maybe why I would think that The Irishman has a better chance of winning, even though I don't know. Like the Avengers and Star Wars, it would be almost like a kick in the crotch if they don't win for best visual effects. But at the same time, as far as what they were trying to do with The Irishman, it's kind of a much more, it's kind of pushing the boundaries more, I guess. And as far as storytelling too, do you usually, this is an odd question, do you guys usually watch the Academy Awards? I hardly ever watch them.
I always watch the whole thing.
You watch the whole thing?
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I'll watch them if there's like a party, but I'll do a list of who I think should win, but then I do a list of who I think who would win.
Because the only time I've seen it in recent years, and that's why I knew about Blade Runner, is because my friend that works at Lionsgate on the production side of things and the finance side of things, he always watches them because he's more in that loop of that industry. And so I would always go over to their house and just hang out and we'd watch it there. But aside from that, I usually don't watch them. I just hear, I'll look up the list and things like that.
Well, going back to Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and the Oscars, I am open to seeing it win anything because I think that original storytelling, for me it's a welcome win.
For sure.
Yeah.
I have a feeling it could win best script.
But yeah, because there's a best original and best adapted. So I think it would definitely be a contender.
And have you read Quentin Tarantino's scripts before, Taylor?
Yeah, in school, I think I chose to read Reservoir Dogs for an assignment.
Nice. I bet those must be really fun screenplays to read.
Yeah, definitely. It's hard though with Quentin Tarantino because so much of it is visual and like the weaving of the storytelling. You're kind of like, oh wait, what's happening? I remember when Once Upon a Time on Hollywood came out, there was some talk about how Sharon Tate's character didn't have a lot of dialogue. So I would be curious what you guys thought of that because I have my opinions about it. But you brought something up earlier today about. What did you ask me? If it would have been someone else, would it have still worked actress-wise?
Yeah. I was just like, it probably could. In my head, I thought it could have been anyone else for Sharon Tate. You know what I mean? Like, in my head, it's because her role wasn't even that important. And she's such a in high demand actress right now. I mean, for all the movies she does, and she's known for Harley Quinn, like, her face is so iconic now. Yeah. You would think there would maybe be more to it. But I think no matter what, it works.
Right. And I think she'll be nominated at least for Best Supporting for sure.
Whoa, you think so? With
Interesting. How much screen time do you think she had overall? Because I've only seen it that one time.
Yeah, I mean, I think she had a lot of screen time, but I guess not to be a Quentin Tarantino apologist, but I believe that what's the woman's name again? The actress?
Margot Robbie?
Yeah, I think that she defended him too. I think that you're looking back and it's nostalgic, and part of nostalgia is that it's not always completely true, and we don't really have a whole biography of Sharon Tate because she died so young. I think she was 26, and so it kind of is in itself saying something that we don't really know this person, and yeah, I think I can see both sides of it. Where I think Ali actually mentioned like, oh, she hasn't really said anything yet, and we're about 45 minutes in,
Yeah.
but
Uh-huh.
That's true. I don't think she says anything until her friends come over or something like
or
that.
until she's at like the movie theater, I
Oh,
think.
the movie theater. You're right.
Yeah.
The movie theater
That's right.
scene.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She definitely has a strong presence. Like sometimes it's not verbal, but her non-verbal acting is very strong in it. It definitely she adds a huge dimension to it, especially like you said at the end you get that payoff where you see her still alive and well. But yeah, I don't remember her saying a whole lot, but at the same time, now that I'm thinking back again, I just I've only seen it once.
Yeah.
Now I'm thinking back, I'm like, oh, yeah, when she is on screen, whether she's speaking or not, she does have a big impact on what's going on, though.
I just know though, when I first started working on films, whenever my shots would come up in the movie theater, I wanted to see how everyone reacted.
Oh yeah, like she did. She's like looking around.
I totally understood when she was like
Yeah,
looking
it was
around, like,
just cute.
did
She
you,
just
and
kind
then
of
it
looks
would be
around.
like,
She's just kind of
that's the
grinning.
worst visual shot ever.
Ever had
Uh,
in here.
Burn the frame. Like, oh no, that's not me. That's me. That was John.
That's funny.
But in terms, I think when you asked me if it could have been anyone else, I was like, well, if it was a no-name actress who looked like Sharon Tate, I think it would have worked. I think it just needed to look enough like Sharon Tate because you're actually seeing her on screen during the movie
Yeah.
theater scene. I thought that was really respectful that they didn't, put Margot Robbie in there.
Yeah, yeah.
So, I mean, I think that they couldn't have gotten such a big actress who looked enough like her. So, I thought it worked.
Didn't they also kind of get a blessing from the family?
Yeah, I was telling Nick that Quentin, my friend Quentin, he worked alongside, I believe, Sharon Tate's sister in getting permission about. Oh, and you know what? I read that they used some of her wardrobe. They gave her,
Oh,
they
wow.
gave Margot Robbie
That's
some
so
of her
cool.
clothes
Oh,
and
wow.
scarves. And the movie was originally going to come out when it was pretty close to the 50-year anniversary of her death. And the family didn't like that, so they pushed it back or forward. I think it came out sooner than it was going to. So, yeah.
Oh, it's interesting. So he did, because remember I was saying like, yeah, I wonder if Quentin Tarantino would go into this territory where it's, dealing with this sensitive subject matter. So he did seek out like, hey, I want to be respected, because you don't think him as a guy that really worries too much about that.
Totally. I think
I
that
wouldn't
showed a
have
little
loaned you-
growth.
Yeah, I would have loaned his wardrobe because
Well-
they had this priceless antique. I forgot it was like a violin or some musical instrument in Hateful Eight, and it was supposed to. And Kurt Russell was supposed to smash it, right? Do you know the story or no?
No.
So Kurt Russell takes this, gets all mad, and he smashes this instrument. Well, they had a fake version of it made to look exactly like it, and he was rehearsing, or it was being filmed, and Quentin Tarantino knew, but they didn't swap out the original. So he smashed this original, and Quentin Tarantino's off camera giggling and chuckling, and he had to pay all kinds of money and stuff. But the museum that they had borrowed it from was still like, dude, the thing was priceless, and he knew it was getting smashed. I was like, do I really want to loan you her clothes?
That's why they had to get her original clothes.
Especially when they have access to a flamethrower.
Yeah, from a writing perspective too, I loved how they set that up, and like they set it up in a film. Oh, I thought that was just so great. That was
It
so
was so
satisfying.
fun,
You're
yeah.
like, yes, the flamethrower is back.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, he was almost parodying himself though with the Nazi scene, right? Like in the movie.
Yeah, he said something about like burnt sauerkraut
Yeah.
or something. I'm like, oh my god.
But it was like, making fun of Inglourious, or like, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's. I mean that's. So how many movies has he done now? How many does? Because he wanted to do 10
9.
films, right? Is this 9?
Yeah, I
Right?
was gonna
This-
bring that up.
This is number 9.
and I think that there was something where it's technically 10 if you count one of his. He had like some.
Oh.
Do you know what I'm
yeah.
talking about?
Mhm.
I don't know what I'm talking about, but I have heard that he did like
Yeah.
some kind of like short film or something. In Quentin's mind, people were like, "Oh, he probably thinks of that as a film." So is this his last film?
So is he going to do another film, or people don't know at this point, or?
He said something about World War One. He was gonna change it so it never happened. No, I'm just kidding.
I was like, really? Tell me more, Nick. It'd be fun to see what he does for his kind of last film, if this wasn't his last film. Just subject matter, because it's so fascinating, whatever he chooses. And,
You think
obviously...
it'll be about himself?
Oh, you think so?
I don't know. Do you think he's the type of person to do like a movie about himself or like his own story?
I don't know if
for
he'd
his own
find
background.
himself interesting enough or not. I don't know. I always liked that he used to always have like cameos in his movies and things like that. I always found those
Yeah.
fun, but I don't know if he'd do a movie about himself. But I'd like to get like definitely at least one more Quentin Tarantino movie. Like they're never bad.
He's not gonna
Admittedly,
stop.
some
He's
of them,
so young.
some of them I don't think I've seen, but like the was it the Robin? What were you saying? The one movie?
Jackie Brown.
Jackie Brown, yeah, Robinson. That's the best one. Yeah, I don't think I've seen Jackie Brown. I started to watch, I never finished it. But so obviously, I'm not super familiar with like Four Rooms. I've only seen once or twice. So some of them I'm way more familiar than others, but they're just fun films overall, though. So it'd be fun to get some more. But it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, and that original writing is what I think I would miss a lot. And yeah, I don't think that it's very much like him to be like stepping away from that. Like, what would he do? But yeah, losing that originality, I
Yeah.
think, would be a real loss.
And when
You know,
did the
it's-
I mean, so I saw Reservoir Dogs after I saw Pulp Fiction. I didn't know, like I went over to my buddy's house that we were all like on the same team in high school, and we got it on VHS. I'm like, what? Reservoir Dogs? I'm like, what the heck is that? And we put it on, and we were just laughing so hard. But again, that was one I didn't know about. But that was his first of his 10 that he kind of counts, right? When was that released? Do you know?
1992.
So I mean, he's been
That's the year I was born.
yeah, good job. Bam, boom, boom, boom. But that, he's been doing it for a while. I imagine at some point you're like, all right, do I want this pressure? But yeah, you're right. Like, what would he do outside? But then again, there's a lot of time in between his movies, so maybe he has a good life carved outside. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to bring it back to his style, I like how he breaks rules constantly, even like with the weird jump cuts and other things, and even story too. I just like how nowadays I feel like everyone's so like has to make sense, has to have the right arc. It has to like you know if you show something here, it has to pay off later, and I feel like he just doesn't care. He just wants to tell his story.
Yeah, it's almost like it has to be kind of that Avenger thing. Like, it has to be the end of the
Yeah.
world, But for him, it's like it can just be about
Just
a
regular
stunt
people
guy.
and everyday stuff. And you know what's interesting too? I didn't think about it, but we were talking about The Irishman and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood earlier. Martin Scorsese and Quentin Tarantino are both directors that don't shy away, like you said, unlike Avengers and other movies, they don't shy away from just letting shots time, just let the time just go. Because Quentin Tarantino, sometimes I felt like he did it just to do it. Like, yeah, I'm not going to move the camera. I'm not going to cut the camera. But Martin Scorsese does that too with those long dialogue sequences. So it's funny that they're both having movies that are probably going to be in the run in the same year, because they do share, as different as their subject matter is, they do share some stylistic choices as far as just letting shots kind of resolve themselves and not cutting the camera really crazily and things like that.
If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you have any comments about what we're saying or better ideas on what we talked about or corrections, please put them in the comments down below. And then to find our podcast and all of our other links, visit asart.space. See you next time.